When you think of countries that could be considered basketball powerhouses, Canada probably doesn't come to mind. Obviously, there's America, that goes without question. Then you might think of Spain or France, which have produced some great NBA players historically and still do today. There's even been a surprising amount of Australian players who have trickled their way into the NBA over the years. The thing is, Canada is actually the country that's produced the second most NBA players of all time, and it's not just the quantity, some of them have actually been really good. The first player to mention is obviously Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, star player of the Oklahoma City Thunder, who's now considered one of, if not the best scorer in today's NBA, and might just mess around and win MVP this year. There's also Jamal Murray, who's already an NBA champion beside Nikola Jokic and a proven playoff performer. Anyone remember Bubble Murray? And of course, before all of them, there was Steve Nash, a back-to-back MVP and Canada's first true basketball superstar. But you might not have even known these guys were Canadian unless you're a dedicated fan. This plays into why Canada doesn't really feel like an international basketball powerhouse. Canadians are in many ways very similar to Americans. They speak the exact same language, follow the same sports for the most part, and if you didn't know, most Canadians live near the border and have ties to America in one way or another. It's even pretty easy and popular for Canadian kids to attend American colleges, especially for sports prospects. Funny enough, James Naismith, the inventor of basketball, was actually a Canadian working at a college in Massachusetts. And Canada even took part in the very first Olympic basketball final against America. Basically, Canada has always been a part of the game, it's just that they blend in so well with Americans that you might not even notice them.
I get to the rim on anybody.
But it's time to give Canada its spotlight. Let's briefly go over the history of Canadians in the NBA and see just how far the talent has grown, from humble beginnings to what might be the sport's next big competitor for Team USA. In the early days of the NBA, Canadians were there, but few and far between. That's not all that surprising. Canada was and still is in many places a hockey-first country. It's cold, icy, and basketball just didn't have the same support from the people as it did in the US. All the best athletes were mostly focused on making it to the NHL. Still, even back then, there were a few trailblazers helping to slowly push the game northward. By the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, we started seeing a few more Canadians trickling into the league. There weren't any big names, but it was clear that basketball was actually catching on in Canada. The major turning point came in the mid-90s, when the NBA expanded into Canada with two new teams, the Toronto Raptors and the Vancouver Grizzlies. The Raptors and people like Vince Carter, even if he isn't Canadian, really contributed to the Canadian basketball scene, and this can be proven by the fact that the vast majority of modern Canadian basketball players and prospects come from Toronto, or the region around it, and grew up watching the Raptors. Even though the Grizzlies didn't last long in Vancouver, both franchises helped establish basketball as a major part of Canadian sports culture. To this day, there are passionate Grizzlies fans who still want the team to return. We're getting ahead of ourselves though. There's also another very important reason basketball has taken off in Canada since the mid-90s. The year was 1996. Canadian Steve Nash had just been drafted by the Phoenix Suns. After struggling to find his way in the league and riding the bench for a few years, by the 2000s, Nash had proven that he wasn't just Canada's best basketball player, he was actually one of the best in the world. A floor general with unmatched vision and efficiency, Nash won back-to-back MVPs and inspired an entire generation of Canadians. By the time the LeBron era kicked off in the mid-2000s, the groundwork had been laid. Canadian kids were growing up and watching NBA games on TV, going to Raptors games in person, and dreaming about playing in the league one day. And by the early 2010s, that dream was starting to look a little more realistic. Canada's first big prospect of the LeBron era was Andrew Wiggins. He was hyped as the next big thing, even earning the nickname Maple Jordan. And while his careers had ups and downs, he's still a big part of Canada's NBA narrative, especially after helping the Warriors win the 2022 title. Now, after a slow trickle of talent for years, we're in the midst of a full-on Canadian basketball boom. Again, thanks mainly to Steve Nash and the Raptors, Canadians are now so in love with basketball that it's actually a well-known fact that Canadian players or even American players playing for the Raptors get the red carpet treatment in Toronto. Lou Will even mentioned on PG's podcast that he got special treatment after winning 6th Man of the Year in 2015, and that he's envious of the group that won the championship because he knows how Toronto treats its players. Because of the ascension of basketball in Canadian culture, it comes as no surprise that there are more Canadians in the NBA than ever before. And not just role players, but legitimate stars. This current wave is arguably the most talented in the country's history. There's actually 26 players who come from Canada in the NBA right now, which is probably more than you thought. You've got steady contributors like Dillon Brooks, who's built a reputation as one of the league's most ruthless defenders, Lou Dort, a lockdown guard who's carved out a key role in Oklahoma City, and of course RJ Barrett, the hometown hero for many Toronto fans, now repping the Raptors himself. Let's not forget about one of the tallest players in the NBA, Zach Edey, who plays for Memphis. It seems like every year there's a new star or borderline star player coming out of Canada. But the crown jewel of this new generation, that's gotta be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai has emerged as a true superstar, an all-NBA talent, a clutch performer, and someone who could very realistically become the best Canadian player ever. He's already settling into being in the MVP discussion year after year, and it seems like he's actually gonna win it too this year. The way he's carrying both his team and his country suggests he's just getting started too. Could Shai become the face of Canadian basketball? Could he inspire even more kids in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, or Halifax to pick up a ball and chase that dream? Time will tell, but the future looks extremely bright. From humble beginnings on frozen courts and snowy driveways to producing all-stars, MVPs, and champions, Canada's basketball journey has been crazy. It might even get crazier in a few years. Lots of Canadians watched the Raptors win the championship with Kawhi, and basketball has seen an extreme uptick in popularity since then. There's a good chance we might even see a bigger wave if we give it 5, maybe 10 years for those kids who got inspired by Kawhi, Lowry, Siakam, and even DeRozan. We might just be witnessing a new global basketball powerhouse forming right before our eyes. Thanks for watching, and hey, next time you see a kid draining threes in the snow, just remember, they might be the next Shai.